So it's time for Carolyn and me to move out of state, move out of Missouri. As you know, we are originally from Missouri. Carolyn grew up in St. Louis City. And then she moved south when she got older. South, I guess, south of St. Louis. And she bought 8 acres and lived there forever. And then I kind of just traveled all over the place. I started out my life in the east side of Missouri, and just south of St. Louis, a different county as Carolyn. I guess I was 10 years old and I moved to the central part of the state, then moved back, and then I joined the military, traveled the country for a little bit, came back to Missouri, lived 10 years in central Missouri. Then I moved east again, so I've moved around quite a bit. Carolyn's been pretty stable at the east side of Missouri. Now we're more towards the southwestern portion of the state, and we're much higher in elevation, and I tell you, this area is really nice. When Carolyn and I met, I was still living in an apartment, and she eventually moved in with me at the apartment. Then we moved to 8 acres. It was a rental property. What it was is a brother and sister owned the property. Their parents lived there until they passed away, and so they rented it out, and they rented it out really cheap. It was $350 a month for 8 acres and a small house. It wasn't huge. You had to go through the master bedroom, which was their only one bedroom, to get into the bathroom. And in order to get into the basement, I guess it was a basement cellar thing, you would have to actually go outside and circle around the house and go through the door in the back. Had a well, a septic tank, it was out there kind of outside the city limits. I guess it was outside the city limits a little bit. Really enjoyed that place. And I really wanted to buy it, but he just wasn't going to sell it. I don't know what they're hanging on to it for. He didn't really like the place. I mean, he loved the place, but he didn't like having to take care of it. I still wish I could have bought that place. I don't know how much he would have asked for it. It would have been quite the price tag, I'm sure. Then, of course, we started traveling, and we bought a pop-up camper, fixed it up, quit our jobs, and we headed east. Started out in Mississippi, and then kind of, I guess, Tennessee, and then over to Virginia, if I remember correctly. But we definitely were in Virginia. We stayed in the George Washington National Forest. I think it was George Washington, Thomas Jefferson National Forest. And so you kind of flip-flopped back from Virginia to West Virginia. It was right there on the border of the two states. And the first place we went when we got to Virginia, it was actually kind of interesting. We camped on the Virginia side of the park, of the campsite. But if you went to the privy, the bathroom, it was in West Virginia. And it was just a short little walk. But you could climb this path and go up a hill. I mean, it was huge. We were so out of shape. But it was, I think, a half mile. And then you got to the top of the mountain. Boy, you just overlooked everything. It was just beautiful. Now, what was so nice about it is you were sweating just terribly bad when you were heading up the hill. But then you would sit down on the edge of the mountain and that cool breeze would hit you. It was just, it was great. And then we stayed in the winter in Florida. Somebody burned down our pop-up camper, went to South Dakota, went to Nebraska, Missouri. We camped in Missouri. And then I guess on our third year, we headed west. And we ended up in the North Rim Grand Canyon. And I think that was 8,000 feet above sea level. Carolyn actually got sick the first week we were there from height sickness or whatever you call that. And we didn't know what it was. We Googled it and finally figured out what it was. But it was so far away from anything. Now, at the North Rim, there is a little gas station there that you can travel to. Didn't know this at first. But you can get water there. You buy water. And that's the thing, is everywhere you went, you had to buy water. Over on the east side in Missouri, you could find water. It was tough, but you could find free water. But we got to North Rim, and before we actually entered the National Forest, we stopped at this RV park. It was a paid site, and they were selling water. So we went up to the campsite host and said, yeah, we'd like to buy some water. And she said, you're not a guest here. I said, no, She says, we don't sell water. Well, for one reason or another, they felt guilty and they ended up selling us water for the price they were selling water to everybody else. Well, at that point, I found out they have to buy water too. The campsite has to buy water. All the water at the North Rim area was trucked in. So we stayed there for 2 weeks, and it was 100 miles to go get groceries. So we left, went and got groceries, came back to this little gas station. Like I said, there's a little gas station at North Rim. And you bought water there also, and they filled up your buckets or your RV tank or whatever it is you wanted. And they charged you by the gallon. Now, what was funny is the buckets were dirty. And I told the guy, don't rinse the buckets out because every drop you're being charged for. But he did. He rinsed the buckets out. I can't put dirty water in your bucket. That's what he said. So I had to pay for that water too. But they had it trucked in also. So apparently, it's my understanding. Now, I'm not an expert on Arizona by any stretch of the imagination. But apparently, you have to buy water when you're out there. Now, I watched a YouTube couple. They moved out to Arizona. And their goal was to buy water. So they would truck it in. Well, ended up the truck got stuck at their area. So I guess, I haven't watched their videos in I don't know, a few weeks, months. But I guess they weren't able to actually get the water into their place. Now, I assume if you're going to be out there, you buy an IBC tank or 2 or 10 or 50 or whatever it is, and you have these trucks fill it up. Well, when they got stuck, they decided they weren't going to be able to do that, so they wanted to drill a well. And of course, I think drilling wells out there must be just absolutely phenomenally priced. I guess they're going to look at their neighbor and share the cost of the well with their neighbor. So it seems like water is a big issue out in Arizona. Now, when we moved here, before we moved here, we did a lot of research in a lot of areas, including Arizona. And since, here's the thing, we were in the Coconino National Forest near Flagstaff when we decided that we were going to quit the nomadic lifestyle. And we decided we were going to live off grid. So we started doing research. Believe it or not, Arizona was not even in our mindset. I don't think we looked at one property. First place we wanted to look at was Mississippi. It seemed to me, based on our travels, living in the east side of the country was easier than Arizona. So that's where we looked. We looked at Mississippi, Tennessee, Missouri. I think we even looked at Vermont, but Missouri just seemed like it was the place. And it was so interesting. We worked so hard to get out of Missouri just to find out Missouri was the place that we really wanted to be. But Missouri is very friendly to off-grid living. Especially in this area. You get over to the east side or into the Kansas City side, Columbia area, all that stuff, Highway 70, it's probably frowned on significantly. But here, they don't pay any attention to what you're doing. Just keep to yourself, and they're not going to bug you. But like I said, we looked at several different places. There was one place southeast, kinda. It was near the Mark Twain National Forest. It might have been right in the middle of Mark Twain National Forest. And we really liked that place. It was nice. They wanted $7,000 for 10 acres. Now, we bought this for $4,200 for an acre and a half. And it had a well also. But there was no way to get into it. It looked like Missouri knocked out, the road crews knocked out the drive, so we would have had to bulldoze, and it would have been a lot of work trying to get the place set up just so we could get the truck into it. So we decided against it. Also, there was no internet there, no cell signal. I mean, it was way out there in the middle of nowhere. The thing about that, it had a year-round stream, 7 days a week stream, and we could have built a water electricity generator. When we were thinking about buying that place, I'd already considered water. They had a well, but it didn't have a pump. So I was thinking about just taking this from the stream, purifying it, and I'm really glad we didn't get that place, because moving here forced me to figure out how a well works. It just forced me, and I really enjoy having that water all the time, not having to worry about purifying it. I mean, I filter it, don't get me wrong, and I put it through a Berkey, but I can shower with the water as it comes out of the well. I don't have to worry about The thing about this stream that I was looking into is people would build their driveways through the stream. So that means cars were running through the stream. So there would have been road contamination in the stream, and it would have just been not very clean. So everything would have had to been purified. And that's what I was going to do. I wasn't even going to look at the well because I really didn't understand how wells worked. I also didn't know you could buy a 110 volt well pump, deep well pump. I just assumed you had to buy a 220, and we didn't have any way to power that. But buying this place forced me to figure it all out. And we bought a deep well pump. We have the ability to power it off solar panels now. It was just a better solution than the stream, even though I originally thought the stream, it was just by luck. Now we found this place, and it's, like I said, in the western part of the state. It's not very big. And people will say we don't live off grid because we're not a million miles away from people, like in Arizona, 100 miles to get groceries. But to me, that's not the definition. The definition was I just wanted to disconnect and get away from people controlling my life. This acre and a half, it's beautiful. I don't have a lot of worries about people trespassing. I don't have to keep on guard all the time. It's easier to maintain. Carolyn and I are very happy here. As you know, I've been working on the solar panels, making them more efficient, and it wasn't a lot of work. I had to move them all, and I had to move the batteries, and I bought 2 more solar panels, which I'm not even really sure I needed, but I did. And I bought another charge controller. And the charge controller has made all the difference in the world. I probably will get 1 more battery, maybe 2. And life has become real easy. Since we are able to run the well all the time off the solar panels, life has just become so easy. I've put the old generator away. Well, it's actually a fairly new generator. I put it away. We're not running the well off the generator anymore. The dual fuel propane. So it's just on standby in case something goes wrong. I really love it. But I said the other day that this place does get cloudy on a regular basis. And in the winter, we may struggle with the well. I may have to think about how we're going to do things with the well in the wintertime. I don't know for sure yet. By this standard here, what we got going on now, the batteries are charged by noon, even after we run the well. So it seems reasonable to me that on a sunny day in the winter, I should be able to run the well, and at least by 4 p.m. the batteries be charged, because the sun's further south and you're not getting quite as much electricity. But parts of Arizona are sunny all year round. They get very little cloudiness. Now, at the North Rim, 8,000 feet up in elevation, it was cloudy all the time. It rained every day we were there, thunderstorms every day. Short periods of thunderstorms, and they weren't very dangerous. They look spooky and ominous, but mostly just rain. We collected rainwater while we were there too. It's the first time I ever did that. Then we went to Flagstaff, and Flagstaff was much nicer. Now, Flagstaff is still higher up in elevation. It's my understanding Flagstaff actually gets a significant amount of snow in the wintertime, so that means there has to be clouds in Arizona. Has to be if it's snowing. I was told you need to move Arizona because of the sunlight, which I agree, and you don't have to deal with the wintertime. I started really thinking about our situation here in Missouri and Arizona, and thinking, well, maybe we should move. Maybe this is the wrong spot. So in Arizona, either I find a place in the desert or I go up in elevation. If I go to the desert, well, that means I got plenty of sunlight, and no winter to deal with. But if I go up in elevation, I'm not going to have plenty of sunlight because it snows, which means it's still going to be winter conditions. Problem with Arizona in my mind is this tree right here, this oak tree. In Missouri, you got lots of oak. Hardwood, it's like the 3rd or 4th hardest wood. I just don't know what kind of wood they have in Arizona, but mostly pine is my understanding. And pine is terrible to burn. You're not even really supposed to burn it in these wood stoves, these new efficient wood stoves. It says it right in the instructions. When you really think about it, what is it that you need the most when you're living off grid? People will say that you need electricity, but that's not true. Electricity is probably secondary. It's nice to have. We don't have a lot of it, so must not need a lot of it. Water. You gotta have water. Everything revolves around water. You have to have it. And Arizona, if you're going to be in an area where you're not going to have winter conditions and year-round sun, you're not going to get water. So you have to buy it. You come to Missouri, water's everywhere. You got water, streams and wells, and it's all yours. You don't have to share it with anybody. I can go down the hill to a natural spring and get water. I certainly don't have to have it trucked in. When making a decision about Arizona and Missouri, it really is what your preference is. If you go up in elevation in Arizona, it's like living in Missouri without the oak trees. If you go down in the desert, you're not gonna have water. So I'm gonna stay here. Missouri has water. And when we're nomads, the hardest thing to find was water. I'm not gonna do without it again. So if you'll click this up next box, take you to a video where I was talking about not being able to live off grid. So I hope I can inspire you to really research what it is you want. So you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.